Delighted to be joined in the studio by Wes Streeting, Shadow Health Secretary and Labour MP for Ilford North. Wes, if I may call you that. How are you?
Lovely. Wes. No,
You've been called Wes. Lovely to see you.
Very nice.
It's slick, isn't it? First day here.
Absolutely.
Very good to see you in studio and in the flesh rather than down the line, so to speak. Right, let's talk about this strike on the Houthis, because I'm intrigued by the division in the Labour Party over this issue. We've had your Labour colleague, Asbana Begum, labelling the strikes by Britain and America as dangerously provocative. I mean, is she familiar with who the Houthis are and what they're capable of? There are still some fruitcakes in the Labour Party, aren't there?
Well, the provocation is obviously on the part of the Houthis. They are the ones that chose to attack commercial shipping and perhaps even more seriously chose to attack HMS Diamond, one of our own vessels carrying serving personnel who are there to protect Britain, keep us out of harm's way. And I think the action the government's taken is the right action. It's the same action Keir Starmer would have taken if he were in number 10. And Keir Starmer's been clear about that. And I think, by the way, Keir Starmer, being no doubt, is speaking on behalf of the vast majority of the Labour Party. There are one or two colleagues who've criticised, but
should she lose
Keir Starmer speaks for the Labour Party.
It's not particularly befitting, is it, of an elective representative to in some way seem to be supporting the Houthis against the British in this? Shouldn't Begum lose the whip?
Well, it's the decision for Keir Starmer and the Chief Whip. Well, I just think, we're a democracy. We're going to disagree from time to time. The important thing is that the vast majority of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, John Healey, our Shadow Defence Secretary, are absolutely clear, having been briefed on the government on the nature of the threat, as well as the information that I think is in the public domain, which I'm surprised by those comments. It's the Houthis that have been provocative. They have attacked not just British personnel and a British ship, but they've attacked British interests. And we should be in no doubt whatsoever, particularly against the economic backdrop this country faces, that their actions in the Red Sea are threatening the world economy, as well as threatening...
Although Starmer had previously said that he wouldn't ever support military action unless there was a parliamentary vote. So how does he square that circle?
Well, to be fair to Keir, he was interviewed this morning, Keir's been, I think, very clear about the fact that you would want to have a vote in Parliament before military action takes place, particularly when it comes to the deployment of troops. There will always be circumstances in which government has to act quickly and decisively and without reference to Parliament. And that's why Keir Starmer would have made exactly the same decision in these circumstances. The government did, to be fair to them, brief the opposition before action took place, as well as the Speaker of the House of Commons, and the Prime Minister's coming to the House of Commons on Monday. So while we criticise the Prime Minister for many aspects of his domestic record,
not this one.
We're not. And look, we don't go out of our way to disagree with the government for the sake of it, especially when it comes to foreign policy. You want to try and speak with one voice as the country. Is
Keir Starmer a hypocrite, though? I ask you this because I was intrigued by the story that we covered in the week on The Telegraph, that Starmer had taken a Qatari-funded private jet to COP28. It's in his latest declaration of financial interests. It shows the trip for him and 3 staffers cost £25,000. Hang on a minute, wasn't this the same Keir Starmer who said he wouldn't travel out to Qatar for the World Cup because of the human rights record?
Well, I'd say draw two distinctions. One is this meeting with the Emir of Qatar was about the crisis in Gaza and the crucial role that Qatar is playing in terms of hostage release and trying to see a diplomatic exit point from this terrible war, as well as other areas of shared mutual interests. And it's right that we engage with world leaders, and there was an opportunity for Keir to do that around the COP.
Should he have taken the 25 grand funded private summit jet there, though? We know his views on environmental issues, let alone his views on Qatar's human rights record. Yeah,
well, taking private jets should never be the norm, particularly domestic flights, which the Prime Minister's been busy doing. There was an opportunity that arose for Keir to meet the Emir of Qatar.
Though,
hang on a second. In terms of being able to meet the Emir of Qatar on the timings that were available and to seize that opportunity while Keir was in Dubai, he took that opportunity because, if Keir is the Prime Minister of the country after the next general election, we want to be able to work and influence with partners around the world, with other countries around the world, in Britain's national self-interest, but also in terms of sort of collective global interests as well. And Qatar is playing a critical role at the moment in the Middle East.
I mean, I appreciate they have played a critical role in the release of hostages. We've also got links to Hamas, housing Hamas's leader in Qatar. I mean, it could be a case of keep your friends close and your enemies closer. However, this does show poor judgment, doesn't it?
No, I think it's even more important to engage. And whether people are our allies or our adversaries or somewhere in between, having a Britain that is engaged on the global stage, trying to use our influence and leverage to both in terms of our own national self-interest, but also in terms of the values that Britain upholds on the international stage, it is important to engage.
OK, I mean, some people might think a 25 grand private jet trip isn't exactly man of the people, but let's move on. Let's talk about the Green Prosperity Plan, that £28 billion. Is it an ambition or a target? I'm getting confused because it was a target and now it's been watered down into an ambition.
No, well, the target is for clean power by 2030. And what Labour has been setting out on energy policy, I think, is an approach that delivers all sorts of benefits. Lower bills for the consumer, which is really important in the cost of living crisis. More jobs, particularly in areas of our country that have suffered massive deindustrialisation over decades with the loss of older industries. This is the opportunity to put that right. To give Britain its energy security back when it's, we don't want to be prone to the whims of tyrants and dictators around the world when it comes to our energy supply.
Yes. What
we have said, and what has continued to be difficult for us in the last couple of years since that commitment was initially made, is the state of the economy and public finances. And we're absolutely clear, Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves, the entire shadow cabinet, the fiscal rules and sound management of the public finances comes first.
But are you going to replace those 32 gas-fired plants, or are you going to retrofit them? And if you are, how much is that going to cost? And can you do it in the next 7 years?
Well, we'll spell that out in our manifesto at the general election, which will be fully costed and fully funded. We want to get to clean power by 2030. We want to do so in a way that brings real benefits to consumers, not hikes up the costs, because I think that's where the sweet spot of green transition is, that there is unquestionably a cost to us in the longer term of failing to act. But I think in the short to medium term, we can deliver those benefits for consumers of lower bills, more and better paid jobs, and giving Britain our energy security back.
Quick question on toothbrushing before we get on to what you want to talk about today, which is mental health, particularly among men. Toothbrushing and children having to be taught toothbrushing in primary schools. At what point do you turn around and say this is also the result of bad parenting?
Well, it is, unquestionably. I mean, I'd say that from the outset.
James Daly was very criticised for talking about, I won't use the word on a Sunday morning, but bad parenting. He was criticised. The left rounded on him and said, how dare you stigmatise parents? But actually, there are some parents here that are bad. Why don't you teach the parents how to teach the children to brush their teeth, rather than lumbering teachers with the job?
Well, there's no doubt that health visitors can and do play a great role. There aren't enough of them, and we've got a commitment to train up 5,000 more health visitors as part of Labour's workforce plan for the NHS. So that early intervention can make a difference. But look, if it's up to me, kids would turn up to school with these skills already.
So you think some parents are bad? What do we do about it?
Well, I think one thing you can't do is just say to the kids, I'm really sorry your parents haven't bothered to teach you to brush your teeth. You're going to have your teeth pulled out in A&E so we are acting. It's proven to work. As with so many of the health policies we're setting out, we're taking things that are tried and tested and thinking, OK, well, how do we scale that up and roll it out? Because let me tell you, the NHS has got more pilots than the RAF. What they're not so good at is adopting good practice and rolling it out everywhere.
How do we adopt better good practice when it comes to mental health? I know you're really concerned about the suicide rate, particularly amongst men and young men.
Yeah. It's the biggest killer. It's the biggest killer of young men.
What should we do? Because lots of people say that care in the community hasn't worked.
Well, I think a few things. One is we've got a commitment to have dedicated mental health support in every primary and secondary school in the country.
Can you start
community mental health hubs in every community, and 8,500 extra mental health workers who will be specifically trained on self-harm, which is also a big issue. It's a fully costed, fully funded policy.
How much will it cost?
£750 million, which, alongside the wider investment we've earmarked for the NHS, fully costed, fully funded, in this case by abolishing the tax breaks enjoyed by private schools and private equity, because we think that would be a fairer way of
Quick question on private schools, because your colleague Bridget Phillipson wasn't able to answer this, as brief as you can be. What are you going to do with those children who probably, if you get into power in the autumn, may have left their schools already because their parents can't afford them, or indeed little schools have closed down because people can't afford the fees? You're going to have thousands of new children in the state system. How are you going to accommodate them on day one? Brief answer.
Well, let's look at the increase in private school fees over more than a decade.
Physically accommodate them?
I'm not buying these hang on a minute. I'm not buying these crocodile tears from private schools. They hike their fees up year after year after year.
The Independent Schools Council has talked about there being 40,000 50,000 kids in the system if this happens.
Well, they would say that, wouldn't they?
Well, say if it's 5,000, what will you do with it?
Hang on a minute, because I think this needs to be called out. They hike up their fees year after year. We don't see drops in numbers.
If you can't answer, I just assume you don't know.
Don't take Michael Gove, who is not a man I normally agree with, gave the best argument I've seen on this in the times when he was, funny enough, when he wasn't in government. And he said, why should we subsidise the education of oligarchs rather than put the money into our state schools, into the majority of our kids?
We don't know what's going to happen to them in limbo.
No, don't buy the crocodiles' tears of the private schools. Don't be so gullible.
Thank you very much, Wes Streeting, for coming in this morning.